Welcome to Have You Read It, the channel where we bring books to life, one summary at a time. Today, we're tackling Meghan O'Gieblyn's fascinating and thought-provoking book, God, Human, Animal, Machine: Technology, Metaphor, and the Search for Meaning. Get ready for a deep dive into the complex interplay between technology, our understanding of consciousness, and the enduring human quest for meaning in a world increasingly shaped by machines. O'Gieblyn begins her exploration with a personal anecdote, receiving a life-sized robotic dog, Aibo, for research purposes. This seemingly simple act becomes a launching pad for a broader examination of our relationship with technology and the very definition of life itself. The lifelike responsiveness of Aibo challenges the traditional Cartesian view of animals as mere machines. Descartes' Discourse on Method. O'Gieblyn reflects on Buber's concept of the threshold of mutuality in human-animal interaction, contrasting it with her own initial experience with Aibo, where a programmed eagerness for touch mimics the feeling of connection with a living being. Buber, I, and Thou. This sets the stage for a broader exploration of how we anthropomorphize, imbuing objects with sentience, a tendency arguably rooted in our evolutionary need to prioritize animate threats, Guthrie, Faces in the Clouds. The story of Aibo, therefore, isn't just about a robotic dog. It's about the inherent human tendency to seek meaning and connection, even in artificial constructs. The initial fascination with Aibo's technology, particularly its neural networks, leads O'Gieblyn to explore the computational theory of mind. This theory, pioneered by McCulloch and Pitts, posits the human mind as functioning like a Turing machine, manipulating symbols according to predetermined rules. McCulloch and Pitts, 1943. However, O'Gieblyn highlights the limitations of this metaphor, especially regarding the hard problem of consciousness, the subjective experience that remains unaccounted for in purely mechanistic models. Chalmers' What Is It Like to Be a Bat? The author's own journey of faith and deconversion further informs her perspective, transitioning from a belief in a divinely illuminated world to a more disenchanted materialist one, Weber's concept of disenchantment. She acknowledges her own internal experience as less an essence than a circuit board, a mad decision tree, shaped by the metaphors of our technological age. The arrival of Aibo also coincides with a period of solitude in O'Gieblyn's life, highlighting the role of technology in shaping social interaction. Her conversations with Aibo, initially limited to voice commands, evolve into the anthropomorphic chatter typical of pet ownership. This seemingly insignificant aspect of her narrative underscores the blurring lines between human-technology interaction and the human-animal bond, a distinction her husband finds deeply unsettling. This contrast highlights the diverse human responses to technologically mediated companionship, a trend amplified by the ubiquity of AI assistants like Alexa, to which humans develop surprising attachments. The article about the woman who found sadistic pleasure in verbally abusing Alexa, only to have her conscience pricked by her toddler's observation, perfectly captures this conflict between the recognition of AI's non-sentience and our inherent tendency to anthropomorphize. Dreyfus, the terrible joy of yelling at Alexa. Her husband's initial revulsion towards Aibo, rooted in a deep love for real dogs, evolves into acceptance and even a form of anthropomorphism, highlighting the irresistible human tendency to ascribe life to even unconvincing simulacra. This chapter also touches on the author's encounter with a blog showcasing the quirky outputs of a neural network trained on different data sets. Recipes, pickup lines, novel beginnings. The author's tendency to anthropomorphize the network's outputs highlights the ease with which we project human characteristics onto technology, revealing a deeper societal discomfort with accepting the non-human nature of intelligence. The husband's initial skepticism underscores how our conceptions of human exceptionalism are challenged by increasingly sophisticated AI, yet even his initial resistance breaks down, demonstrating the powerful influence of interaction on our perception of both artificial and natural intelligence. O'Gieblyn then embarks on a historical analysis of how we define humanity through its likeness to other things: God, clocks, computers. She examines the concept of imago Dei, the notion that humans are made in God's image, tracing its evolution through theological history. From Maimonides' emphasis on self-awareness to Augustine's focus on reason and higher thought, imago Dei reflects evolving conceptions of human distinctiveness. However, the increasing capabilities of AI challenge these traditional markers of humanity. The historical progression from higher cognitive abilities being the sole markers of intelligence to embracing emotional experience and sensory perception, illustrated by the shifting perceptions of AI's intelligence, from chess playing to embodied interaction, highlights the fluid and ever-evolving nature of this definition. Goodall's experiences with chimpanzees, initially dismissed as lacking minds but possessing obvious intelligence and emotion, further underscore our tendency to project our self-image onto the natural world and the pitfalls of such anthropocentrism. The author's fascination with Ray Kurzweil's The Age of Spiritual Machines represents a kind of technological eschatology, mirroring the promises of religious redemption. This chapter explores the author's personal disenchantment with her former religious faith and the subsequent search for meaning through technological promises of immortality and transcendence. The author's comparison of Kurzweil's transhumanist vision with the promises of Christian eschatology highlights the similarities between these systems of belief, showing how technological narratives can absorb questions that were once the purview of theology. Kurzweil's patternism, his belief that consciousness is a pattern of information that can persist beyond the physical body, and its potential for immortality through mind uploading, provide a compelling, though still speculative, alternative to traditional religious narratives. The exploration of Kurzweil's patternism and mind uploading leads O'Gieblyn to examine the concept of the resurrection in Judeo-Christian theology. She traces the evolution of this metaphor from a symbolic representation of national restoration to a literal belief in bodily resurrection, highlighting the complex theological debates surrounding the continuity of identity across death. The parallels between the early Christians' theological grappling with the resurrection and modern transhumanist discussions on mind uploading are striking. Both share concerns about the continuity of identity and the role of physicality in consciousness. The author reflects on how the metaphor of the resurrection, when taken literally, highlights the tensions between literal interpretation and the metaphorical nature of religious language, mirroring similar debates within the technological sphere. The concept of transhumanar, meaning beyond human, in Dante's Paradiso, anticipates the language of transhumanism, further underscoring the enduring quest for transcendence across different cultural and intellectual landscapes. The author examines how the computational theory of mind, initially intended as a secular alternative to the concept of a soul, nevertheless resurrects ancient religious longings for transcendence and immortality. O'Gieblyn analyzes the historical development of cybernetics, tracing the shift from an embodied understanding of information processing to a decontextualized view of information as an immaterial entity, akin to the soul. This transition, facilitated by the Macy Conferences on Cybernetics, underscores how the attempt to create a universal metaphor can lead to an unintended metaphysical shift. The author explores the unexpected similarities between transhumanist concepts and Christian prophecies, speculating on the possibility of a hidden continuity between technological visions and religious narratives, a hermetic mystery handed down through time. The omission of Teilhard de Chardin's influence on transhumanism further illustrates how technological narratives can obscure their historical and religious roots. The concept of emergence, the idea that complex systems can generate novel properties not present in their individual parts, is central. This chapter examines how emergence has captivated both biological and technological fields, offering alternative explanations for consciousness and intelligence. The author explores Rodney Brooks' work at MIT, focusing on his subsumption architecture, a bottom-up approach to robotics that contrasts with the traditional top-down approach, and his creation of robots like Cog and Kismet. Brooks's robots, designed with distributed intelligence, highlight how complex behaviors can emerge from simple interactions with the environment, challenging the assumption of a central, controlling brain. The interaction between Brooks' team and Anne Forrest, a theologian embedded with them, further underscores the intersection between theological and scientific approaches to intelligence and the question of the divine image. Forrest draws parallels between modern robotics and Kabbalistic golem making, highlighting the enduring human fascination with creating life and the implicit theological questions involved in this endeavor. The measurement problem in quantum physics, the idea that the act of observation influences quantum phenomena, challenges the objective, third-person perspective of classical science, and highlights the complex relationship between observer and observed. The author discusses the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in physics and the fine-tuning of the universe, raising questions about the seemingly improbable conditions for life. These questions challenge the purely mechanistic worldview and introduce an element of what could be perceived as design, mirroring theological debates about the origins and purpose of the universe. The author considers the possibility that solutions like the multiverse theory, while seemingly offering a naturalistic explanation, require a leap of faith, similar to religious belief. The author's personal experience with a sense of unreality after leaving her religious faith parallels the unsettling implications of quantum physics and the difficulty of finding stable foundations in a world devoid of inherent meaning. The author examines this hypothesis as a modern creation myth, echoing older design arguments that posit a divine creator. The hypothesis, the author argues, addresses the problem of fine-tuning in the universe by suggesting that the universe's apparent design might be a feature of its programming rather than an inherent property. This chapter explores the emergence of simulation theology, where theological concepts are applied to the simulation hypothesis, demonstrating how technological narratives can absorb and reframe theological questions. The author's discussion of the simulation hypothesis's potential for naturalistic theology further highlights the ways in which technological metaphors can reintroduce religious ideas and questions. The idea of false awakenings and the recursive nature of simulations raises questions about the nature of reality and the limits of human perception. This perspective parallels similar concerns in quantum physics, where the limits of observation become fundamental. The author explores the author's experiences of doubling and the human tendency to seek patterns and meaning, even in random events, highlighting the pitfalls of confirmation bias. The author also reflects on the personal aspects of her intellectual obsessions, highlighting how these have influenced her understanding of the relationship between technology, faith, and reality. O'Gieblyn discusses how this rhetorical device plays a crucial role in our understanding of both the natural and technological worlds. The author examines Anne Conway's critique of Cartesian dualism and her own panpsychist view, where consciousness is a fundamental property of all matter. The author explores how panpsychism attempts to bridge the gap between the mind and matter, offering alternative explanations for the hard problem of consciousness. This chapter also analyzes integrated information theory, IIT, which quantifies consciousness in terms of information integration, suggesting that consciousness is widespread in the natural world. The author also discusses the implications of IIT for our understanding of human-machine relationships and the potential for machine consciousness. This chapter examines the different interpretations of panpsychism, from its more materialist to its more spiritual variations. The author discusses how panpsychism relates to the romanticism and the resurgence of spiritual and mystical practices. The author also explores the potential dangers of panpsychism, such as its propensity to anthropomorphize, and the challenges involved in explaining how consciousness arises from seemingly unconscious systems. The author's discussion with her friend who embraces astrological and mystical beliefs highlights the contrast between rational and intuitive approaches to understanding reality. The author also mentions philosopher Bernardo Kastrup's proposal of a universal consciousness as the underlying substrate of reality, examining its implications for our understanding of both the physical and spiritual worlds. This chapter concludes by reflecting on the complexities of re-enchantment in a technologically saturated world, noting the tensions between the longing for spiritual connection and the pervasiveness of digital technologies. O'Gieblyn explores Chris Anderson's argument for the end of theory in science, the idea that massive datasets and sophisticated algorithms can make predictions more accurately than traditional scientific models. This chapter discusses the limitations of algorithmic decision-making, highlighting the lack of transparency and the potential for bias in these systems. The author examines the implications of black box algorithms for justice and decision-making, specifically in areas like criminal justice and sentencing, underscoring the implications of algorithmic determinism. The author looks at how these systems reinforce existing social inequalities and reflect the biases embedded in the data they are trained on. This chapter discusses how our reliance on algorithms blurs the lines between prediction and control, shaping human behavior in ways that are often imperceptible. The author examines how the pursuit of better algorithms often leads to increased surveillance and data collection, further eroding privacy and individual agency. O'Gieblyn explores the ways in which algorithmic systems reflect and amplify existing social biases and inequalities. This chapter also discusses the challenges of establishing accountability and transparency in these opaque systems, raising questions about the balance between efficiency and justice. She uses her friend's story of shoplifting to illustrate the conflict between free will and the deterministic nature of predictive systems. She explores the implications of predestination, a core Calvinist doctrine, highlighting its impact on her understanding of faith, justice, and free will. O'Gieblyn connects her experience with Calvinist theology to her broader concerns about the power of algorithms, exploring how deterministic systems and opaque algorithms can erode individual agency and sense of self. The author draws parallels between the inscrutable nature of the Calvinist God and the opaque logic of machine learning algorithms, highlighting the unsettling implications of both. The author discusses Douglas Rushkoff's notion of viral media and how the Internet's architecture has accelerated the dissemination of ideas. This chapter explores how the viral metaphor, while initially promising democratization, has been co-opted by powerful entities. O'Gieblyn discusses how the pursuit of virality often prioritizes sensationalism over accuracy and truth. The author looks at the ways in which viral narratives have shaped public discourse, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. The chapter considers the dangers of algorithmic manipulation, the challenges of distinguishing between authentic and artificially generated narratives, and the erosion of nuanced discussion in a highly networked, attention-driven environment. The author concludes with a reflection on the importance of human agency and the need to reassert human values in an increasingly automated world. O'Gieblyn's book isn't a simple argument for or against technology, but rather a nuanced exploration of the profound philosophical and theological questions raised by our increasingly technologically mediated existence. The book highlights the enduring human need for meaning and connection, a need that is often expressed through metaphors and narratives, whether religious or technological. It forces us to confront the limitations of both traditional and modern worldviews, urging us to grapple with our understanding of consciousness, agency, and our place in a universe that may be fundamentally more mysterious than we'd like to believe. Here are some easy-to-remember heuristics from the book. Anthropomorphism is inevitable but dangerous. We naturally project human qualities onto non-human entities, including technology. This can lead to unrealistic expectations and a failure to grapple with the ethical implications of our creations. The limits of the mind are not a weakness. Our limited perspective and capacity for understanding are not flaws, but rather the necessary conditions for meaning-making and ethical engagement. Metaphors are powerful, but treacherous. Metaphors shape our understanding of the world, but taking them literally can lead to misunderstandings and potentially harmful consequences. Technology is not neutral. Technologies are embedded in cultural and historical contexts, and often reflect and reinforce existing biases and inequalities. Agency is a crucial concept. The ability to make choices and act autonomously is a fundamental aspect of human existence, and must be carefully considered when designing and deploying new technologies. Meaning is human. The pursuit of meaning is a deeply human endeavor, requiring a thoughtful and self-aware approach to technology and its influence on our lives. Thanks for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next book dive.